For more on this, I'm joined by our political panel for this Friday. Liberal MP Dennis Jensen is in our Perth studio, and Labor MP Kelvin Thomson is in Melbourne as well. Gentlemen, thanks both for your time today. We'll start on this situation in Bali. Obviously, it appears, as I said, pretty forlorn. And Dennis Jensen, given it appears the PM can't get a return phone call from his Indonesian counterpart, not a great sign, is it?
No, it's not. It's not a great sign. It's a very unfortunate set of circumstances. Obviously, the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister have been doing all that they possibly can to try to get these men not to face the death penalty. But unfortunately, the signs are not looking good.
Kelvin Thomson, your thoughts? Obviously, this is a careful diplomatic area, but Labor lending its full support, albeit with just a slim hope, it appears.
Tom, the opposition is highly supportive of the efforts by the Prime Minister and the Foreign Affairs Minister to prevent these two men from being executed. The fact that there is a delay while further legal appeals are entertained is, I personally think, encouraging. While there's life, there's hope, and we support the endeavours and efforts of the government in relation to this.
I want to get your thoughts on what has been discussed before, the AFP's role in deciding to alert Indonesian authorities and have them arrested in Indonesia instead of Australia. We see every effort being made now to get clemency for these two men, or at least avoid the execution. But obviously, if they're never arrested in Indonesia in the first place, it doesn't happen. Dennis Jensen, this isn't the only case in which this has happened. There was Scott Rush as well. Does this need to be looked at, given the AFP said it was simply following protocol here?
Well, I mean, Scott Rush, of course, was one of the Bali Nine, so that all occurred at the same time. But the simple fact is, if the AFP doesn't cooperate with authorities, for instance, in Indonesia and so on, we won't get reciprocal cooperation, and that obviously doesn't help with crime fighting anywhere. And I mean, nor should we expect that the AFP is not going to fully cooperate with other countries. I mean, would we not cooperate with the United States, because some states there have the death penalty?
The question is, I guess, whether they could at least be arrested on Australian soil. You sound as though you're happy with the situation as is. Kelvin Thomson, your thoughts?
I wouldn't agree with that, Tom. We have legislation concerning mutual assistance in criminal matters where we do not provide assistance in relation to countries where the death penalty could be applied, and that includes the United States, for example. There are cases where the United States seeks our assistance and we say we will only provide that assistance if you give us an assurance that the death penalty will not be forthcoming in this particular case. They provide that assurance, and then we provide the assistance. So it seems to me that we should look at this in the context of the guidelines under which the AFP operates to try and ensure that we don't have this situation. I don't think we should be in the situation where the kind of thing that's happened here could happen again.
Okay, look, I know this is a slightly tricky area diplomatically, but certainly something perhaps to explore down the track. I might move on to the Intergenerational Report, of course, released yesterday. Dennis Jensen, the real message out of this appeared to be, if we don't make the cuts that were seen in the last budget, that quantum of cuts at least, then we'll never get back to surplus. So this appears to be talking about making up for the cuts that didn't happen last time. But do you think that will actually happen in this upcoming budget, given the PM said it will be easier for families, easier for small business?
Well, the point is, there are two ways, obviously, you can go about this. You can do the cuts or ensure that your spending doesn't go up, because obviously your economy grows, and if you ensure that the spending doesn't keep up with the growth of your economy, you effectively get to the same position where you are improving your situation with regard to outgoings and incomings, and that is the important thing, that balance there. But certainly the intergenerational...
How would you like to see this next budget framed then? With similar cuts? Are you happy with bracket creep as well, possibly until 2021 or beyond?
Well, all of those things obviously are in play, and I'm not sure exactly how the Treasurer and in his discussions with Treasury is looking at addressing this, but all of these things need to be taken into consideration, and obviously the Treasurer and the Prime Minister have made clear that we did bite off too much in the last budget, and that's something we've got to be cognizant of. But at the same time, we need to ensure that the massive increase in spending that we saw under Labor, we don't continue, because that is completely unsustainable.
Kelvin Thomson, something you think is unsustainable is this population increase, the migration figure of about 250,000 people a year, and an Australian population in 40 years' time of just short of 40 million. Presumably, if we don't get anywhere near that, and you have another target in mind, this figure of 2.7 people within working age, 15 to 64 years of age, per person over that age, that figure will be even worse. Is that situation sustainable?
Well, Tom, it seems to me that 40 million as a population for Australia is way too high. This is the highest number that we've ever seen. It comes off the back of projections of the net overseas migration rising, being 215,000 each year. This is much higher than the net migration rates we had when the first intergenerational report was brought down, and it is a recipe for intergenerational theft that we bequeath to the next generation: housing unaffordability, job insecurity, student debt, government debt, crowded cities, a degraded landscape. It doesn't have to be this way. As Sweden had the same population as us back in 1945, now they have a population of 9 million. Are we better off than Sweden as a consequence? No, we're not.
You've got, for example, Japan. Now, their population's going backwards because they really don't have much of a migration program in a net sense. The question is, similar to Japan, and they have a bigger problem with an ageing population, but can we afford to ramp or decrease our migration intake, given we all know about the issue of the baby boomers and this ageing population and the number of workers per retirees?
If we have more rapid population growth, we will have higher unemployment and more hardship for young people. What we need to do is to have the sort of slower growth trajectories of, for example, Scandinavian countries, who are in a better position in relation to issues like deficit and debt, who are in a better position in relation to education, skills, training and opportunities for their young people. We're not doing the right thing by young people here. This is a chronicle of intergenerational theft, and frankly we owe it to them to give them a world in as good a condition as the one our parents and grandparents left to us, rather than engaging in something which is going to trash the environment as well as their job prospects.
Dennis Jensen, Labor's claim in this report is that there is just one mention throughout the report of disadvantage, a reference to that, and not one mention of inequality. Given there was this big campaign, and apparently a pretty successful one, against the budget being unfair, is this an opportunity lost when we're talking about a discussion with Australians and voters about saying the government will address any issues of inequality down the track?
Well, obviously issues of inequality are made worse when your economy is not performing well. If your economy is performing well, you get to a situation where you've got full employment, where you have competition by employers for employees, so therefore wages can go up. And I'd like to address some of the things that Kelvin was talking about with a population going to 40 million. It's certainly not a zero-sum game.
You're a fan of Big Australia, are you?
Well, I certainly think we can afford to grow to 40 million. We certainly need to have a demographic where we have a reasonable amount of workers to those that are actually not working, because obviously it's becoming, it would become unsustainable in a similar way to what as you said, is occurring with Japan. The simple fact is, you bring in people, you bring in a lot of talent, these people bring in different skill sets. Now, in terms of crowded cities, Greece and so on, we've got a Northern Australian task force which is looking at ways of developing Northern Australia. Now, clearly, Australians at the moment prefer living in the southern cities, but this is a way of looking at actually populating Northern Australia with people coming in from overseas, where they wouldn't have the similar mindset to those people already in Australia as far as the major southern cities are concerned.
Kelvin Thomson, your thoughts on that? Because perhaps some people think, oh, double Melbourne's population, we're in trouble, but maybe that's not the best approach. Maybe there's another one. And when it comes to generally this conversation, the big Australia Kevin Rudd spoke about, the one that Labor backed away from, where's your sense on your leadership and where they sit on this?
Tom, in relation to Northern Australia, there have been numerous investigations and inquiries into the prospects of developing Northern Australia, and they have shown that if you want to have rapid growth in Northern Australia, this will come at great environmental cost, that there are issues in relation to water supply and environmental damage which need to be taken into account when you're thinking about that. I think if you're thinking about expanding the workforce, you should be aware that there are many people in their 50s and in their 60s who would like to work, but for whom work is not available. So I think it's fanciful to think that we're going to get people working longer into older ages. They're in the workforce when there are no jobs actually available for them right now. So there's an air of unreality about the present debate. There are 800,000 people who are unemployed, many others who are underemployed. We have long-term unemployment. These are the things that we need to focus on fixing.
Okay. Well, we are right out of time. No doubt this IGR is going to be kicked along, plenty more discussions to be had. But for our discussion today, Dennis Jensen, Kelvin Thomson, thanks for your time today.
Good to talk with you.
Stay with us on the program. After the break, Sam Dastyari, the Labor Senator, outspoken about foreign bribery claims. Stay with us.